I don't know if this was a movie or a collective delusion. So guys, how are you? I hope you're doing well. I'm Demonio, the interdimensional demon, who talks the most about DC's animated films on YouTube, and you're on my channel. Firstly, I wanted to say that the thumbnail is not clickbait. This is probably the worst DC animated film I've seen in recent years. I really didn't like it, and I had good expectations. I liked part 1. The first film is very cool, above average of what DC has been doing in this animated universe, with a very efficient plot, focused on the Flash, and with a very cool dramatic arc, especially for those who are already fans of the character. Another very interesting characteristic of part 1 is that it is a film that, despite being the first in a trilogy, is a film closed in on itself, with a beginning, middle, and end, which does not happen in part 2, which desperately calls for part 3 to maybe make some sense. The film starts with a cool scene involving the Bat family facing the Joker and other villains. At that moment I was excited, because even Batman Beyond appears, and I'm a big fan of Batman Beyond, and I was even ignoring the fact that the animation wasn't very good, because I was hoping that nostalgia and a cool script would make up for the bad animation, and yes, I really didn't want to criticize the quality of the animation again. But guys, look at these scenes from the movie. Besides the animation is poorly made and have few frames, look at the way the characters are drawn. Look and tell me in the comments what you think of this animation, and tell me if I'm being picky. But then the film starts to make decisions that I simply can't understand. First, the film starts to show the story of Psycho Pirate, who is a character who appears briefly in part 1, but being a supporting character without any development, and then the film decides to show, through flashbacks, the entire trajectory of his life, starting with his childhood, and this part is only interesting for you to understand how his powers work. The problem is that the film spends a considerable amount of time showing this flashback, but does not show any relevant information that connects the character with the plot of the film we're watching. How did he get that outfit and actually become the character Psycho Pirate? Why was he torturing Dr. Fate's host? Why exactly is he punished by Dr. Fate, in that very specific way? Why exactly was he chosen by the Monitor, if he was an evil person, or at least a person of very dubious character? And his power, as useful as it might be, obviously had the potential to screw everything up, and that's exactly what happens when the Monitor grants some of his power to him. It was basically a recipe for everything going wrong. Another thing that I found very flawed was when the film tries to establish and explain Kara Zor-El's relationship with Monitor, and justify why she became Harbinger, but it's all very confusing and rushed. While in part 1, we had Flash as the character who drove the story through his perspective, here Supergirl doesn't work in the same way. In theory her arc should connect better with the film's theme, since she saw his world is destroyed. The Monitor even harbors anger because of it, this same anger that will be used by Psycho Pirate. I think one of the biggest problems with this film is that it has no story progression. The film starts with the heroes protecting and activating the towers to prevent that reality from being destroyed, and when the film ends they are still doing the same thing, only this time, with generic enemies attacking, and this means that there is no sense of progression of the story you are watching. It is as if the entire film was one big first act, which becomes completely disjointed and meaningless when watched alone. But the problem isn't even that the film stops in the middle without having a conclusion. There are great films that do that, like Spider-Verse 2, which coincidentally also has a first film closed in on itself, and a second film that simply stops without a conclusion. However, in the case of Spider-Verse, the entire script is designed so that there is a progression, a development of the protagonist, and a coherent story arc, and ironically Spider-Verse is a film that also deals with the multiverse. But Demonio, you are comparing a film released in theaters with a film released for streaming with an infinitely smaller budget. Don't you think this comparison is unfair? And I'll tell you no, I don't think so, because I'm not comparing the technical aspects, but the scripts, and yes, it is possible to make good scripts with a low budget, and I can safely say that, using other DC animated films like for example, Animations knew how to adapt the comics well and did a good job. One of the things that irritated me the most as I watched was not the fact that the heroes were doing the same thing the entire movie, but that they were doing it in the dumbest and most inefficient way possible. If protecting the towers that were on Earth in each reality was a top priority, why doesn't the Monitor simply summon more heroes to protect them? In the first part, this is much more justified, as we understand that Monitor only summoned a limited number of heroes, because it wasn't a battle yet, so there would be no point in him summoning 500 Green Lanterns, if the objective was to find a solution to a problem, so it's reasonable to think that he only chose the heroes that he thought had the ability to solve the problem. But in Part 2 the problem became protecting the tower against enemies, and activating it when necessary. So it doesn't make sense he didn't call the Justice League from that world, or the Green Lantern Corps, or any DC hero. And in lands that are uninhabited, you can send heroes from other universes. In Commandy's world, for example, why didn't they send more people after Gorilla died? Why monitor why? John, you have a super powerful weapon based on light, which is precisely the weakness of the enemies, and there aren't even that many enemies. You just need to create a construct around the tower that generates an intense light and drives away the creatures. There were so many possibilities. There were so many ways to protect that tower. Why the hell did you destroy the battery, bro? You're stupid, man. On the planet of the Amazons, things only get worse, in addition to them having destroyed technology, which doesn't make any sense. Why are there so few Amazons fighting there? Hippolyta says that they dominated the planet, and they are only facing a few hundred enemies. How can the entire planet only have that many Amazons? Why doesn't Hippolyta call for reinforcements, since the fate of the planet depends on that battle? But the Monio, I understand that the film is completely meaningless, but at least the cameos, did you think they were cool? Unfortunately, I didn't even like that, as there are few of them and they are much more Easter eggs than appearances themselves. The main special participation that draws attention in this film is the Bat family, but apart from the characters that already appear in the previous film, they didn't even have a decent presentation. Damian has few lines, the fact that he is Bruce's son is not used, and he doesn't have any relevant scenes with his father. Batwing literally only appears in one scene and disappears, and Batman Beyond was what it disappointed me the most, because I thought there would at least be a scene contextualizing who he was, and what his world was like, and his relationship with Bruce. But no, he has practically no lines. He's just there to have another character fighting. I'm sad, honestly. I wanted to come here and say how much I liked this film, because my expectations were good, and I really don't understand DC investing so little in this adaptation, since DC Crisis on Infinite Earths, in the comics, is probably DC's most important saga, and one of the most important hero sagas ever made. But what about you? Do you agree with me? What did you think of the film? Leave it in the comments, and if you liked the video, subscribe to follow the next content. Until next time, my people, demonic hugs.